Thank you for the invitation, Helmut. It's an honor to speak here. And before I came, I was wondering about what I should speak because I'm not steadily in the Whitehead track, but my thinking is still imprinted by Whitehead. And when I saw the title of the conference, it was Sightseeing an Alternative, and all these ecological questions are coming up. And I found it fits totally in a discussions line, which I discussed a couple of years, or since a couple of years. This has to do with Heimat. Heimat is a German concept which I will like to explain to you. So I called my lectures On the Edges of Heimat. It clings a little bit odd, and the subtitle is a translation of process philosophy into political science. So I hope you have a bit of patience with me. It's a kind of speculative thinking. It's not in line with an analytical point of view. I try to bring you in a totally different perspective. And if you hassle with my pronunciation language, I feel uncomfortable by myself. So. Well, first I start with a quotation from Edgar Reis, who is a movie maker, and he brought the concept into the German discussion again after the Second World War II. As a quote, "It is obvious that we have made a mistake in thinking that the market can regulate everything. What we call property and work is no longer tied to place, and this leaves people confused. As human beings, we are not really mobile. We remain tied to our bodies and our history, and our senses seek something to hold on to in familiar places." Also globalization and modernization processes are paths to success, but at the same time they are also currently leading to refocusing on roots and identity. People's origins are becoming defamiliarized as quickly as their living conditions and regional reference points are changing. And Rüdiger Safranski says, "While we can communicate and act globally, it is impossible to live globally. The balance between mobility and being open to the world on the one hand, and being tied to a locality on the other, is a fundamental anthropological requirement. If it's disturbed, people start to search for Heimat, a German word meaning homeland with the connotation of cultural roots. Heimat is not the counterpart of globalization, but its necessary linchpin. When the definition of Heimat is considered in its complexity, it not only reveals similarities with Whitehead's actual location, but it also shows that Heimat itself is an example of an actual location. With that said, Heimat is a springboard into Whitehead's thought too. This means that process philosophy provides an appropriate framework for interpreting the definition of Heimat, by which present societal developments of globalization and problem solution can be understood. I have now 4 steps which I want to entertain, or what we should take together. So first I would like to say something to remembrance of the actual locations. The second point, I will tell you something about Heimat and introduce the concept and analyze it. And the third point, something about the edges of Heimat. And there's a fourth point which I can't present to you because it would be too much. But there was in the last couple of weeks in Dresden big demonstrations on the street. It was called Pegida, the Patriotic Europeans against the Islamization of the, what is Abendland? Of the Occident. Well, let's start with the actual occasion. As you know, it's only a remembrance, every actual occasion is a spatio-temporal unit which possesses its own defined space-time position. It follows that it neither moves nor changes. Actual occasions express the uniform space-time structure of the universe because their external relations fit them into superordinate actual occasions, and their internal relations divide them into subordinate actual occasions. Actual occasions, those unity can be dissolved into subordinate actual entities, are called nexus. These are the normal things, everyday objects, like trees, houses, and cars. This is important for me. I put in the chapter of the actual occasions because I want to show you that these not are minimal quantum mechanical events, but actual occasions are macroscopic things, like the ordinary events which we experience. And when I started to think about this article, I discussed with Reto Ludwig Fetz. He's one of the Whiteheadian in Germany, and say, oh, when you get the problem, because we have to show that the actual occasions are not these microscopic things. So all what I'm saying now is to bring you the idea near that these are not the microscopic things. Nexus take into account the unity of the contemporary events which are not causally tied together. If a nexus owns an ordinal degree, Whitehead calls it society. The content of actual occasions is only constituted by perceptions. However, perception is not limited to sensory perception. It refers to every kind of influence. In order to contain unaware recognition, the concept prehension was introduced, as we already had today. Every entity which is prehended as a unity is an actual occasion. I quote Whitehead now from Process and Reality. God is an actual entity, and so is the most trivial path of existence in far-off empty space. Therefore, actual occasions are not only microscopic entities as often maintained. For Whitehead, the whole universe, or just a single atom, is an actual occasion. He turns against the bifurcation of reality into a mathematical logical world and the apparent world. If all knowledge is reduced down to microscopic particles in presentational immediacy alone, relations are not perceivable. In these cases, there is no empirical knowledge of an extensive continuum, and it is impossible to adequately present the phenomena of the world. Whitehead, in opposition, finds sufficient evidence for causal connections and for temporal continuity already in sense perception. The target presupposition of this evidence is the experience of temporal and spatial extension. Temporally adjoining events are present contemporaneously in a spacious present and perceived with their spatial and temporal extension together. The presence of immediate past events shows that present and future events have to fit in with earlier events in the same way that immediate past events had to fit in with more distant past events. But although all actual occasions of the universe are prehended, not every actual occasion contributes to the new actual occasion. Otherwise, all actual occasions would be the same and therefore indistinguishable. The becoming of actual occasions lacks all positive prehensions for its construction by presenting itself in the concrescence process as the aim of this process. If an actual occasion always and unavoidable reaches its subjective aim, all future events would be determined by present ones and vice versa. This is not the case. The subjective aim is a future aim of a present development envisaged by the becoming actual occasion. An actual occasion is finished if a certain grade of satisfaction is reached, which will then be decided by future actual occasions. The subjective aim will be perceived as a date of the actual world, which is contemporaneous with past actual entities. It determines which prehensions deliver a positive contribution to the growing actual occasion. Then it becomes apparent that one only can distinguish between subjective aim and satisfaction if the concrescence process is limited in time. Whitehead presupposes that teleology assumes temporal atomicity, and that temporal atomicity is only possible in a state of reality which is teleological. In a cosmology with a continuous concept of time, real becoming is impossible. Where are only changes which are transformations from one state into another. However, a physical process which is teleological constituted assumes an aim of development for the single entities. Despite the fact that Whitehead probably did not study the theoretical basics of quantum theory, their first models led him to his speculative philosophy. According to this understanding, the particles, with quotation marks, of reality are no longer material static forms, but spatio-temporal extended events. Whitehead explains that it is equally possible to arrive at his organic conception of the world from psychology on the one side and from mathematical physics on the other. Quantum theory gives us a mathematical model, not of an independent reality, but of our perception of reality. But quantum events behave as a unified system. Henry Stepp says, what you do to it in one place can influence how it will react to a simultaneous probing far away. Quotation end. Whitehead has been blamed for having only a causal theory of perception with which he could not account for contemporary events. But for him, the available information about the faraway system, which is disturbed by the nearby measurement, and the nearby system are one and the same actual location. Now quotation of Whitehead. Just as, for some purposes, one atomic actuality can be treated as thought that there are many coordinate actualities, in the same way, a nexus of many actualities can be treated as thought that there are one actuality. And as you know, reality is then the common presentation of two kinds of processes, depending on whether it's considered from an internal or external perspective. He names it concrescence or transmission. The internal process is the process of concrescence. It makes up the essence of the actual entities and is teleological structured. And the external process is the transmission from actual entity to actual entity. It describes changes within societies of actual entities and is characterized by causality and conformity. Transmission is a process of concrescence processes, and concrescence is a process of transmission processes. And the reality for Whitehead is a process of processes. The whole universe is a single process as well as an infinite complex of processes. That which is socially referred to as Heimat is a result of process of Beheimatungsprozessen, of processes of feeling at home. And at the same time, a nexus of individual Beheimatungen, the feelings of being at home. However, what is Heimat and how can the definition be made useful for political discourse? Now I want to say something about the concept of Heimat and leave the actual location a little bit behind me. The only important point is the starting point that these actual locations are extended macroscopic event-like things. In the present worldwide state of permanent crisis, like 9/11 or the financial crisis, or think on ISIS, the local regionality appears to be the last manageable haven. The Rheingold Institute for Quantitative Market and Media Analysis in Germany observed a return to the traditional and the authentic, and reported a newly awakening longing for Heimat across the globe. The reasons for this are varied. Through mobility, flexibility, and rapid communication, space and time are certainly more available, But when knowledge and information can be exchanged without time delays, it leads to compression in time and generates the desire to look inward. Panic, which used to be localized, now threatens to go global. And this occurrence is intensified by the media, with the result that solely images linger, perpetuating fear. Consequently, the crisis of modernity has its origins not only in the breakdown of the idea of progress, but also in the abundance of time and space. The worry of feeling left alone on one speck of earth with these exceedingly large problems of the world is enhanced by already noticeable demographic changes, namely where rapidly expanding population crowds together and where the population ages and shrinks. Generally, Heimat denotes the images and myths with which one has grown up. It is a place of origin that is inaccessible, into which one has been born and which provides the existential foundation as expressed by language, customs, and patterns of behavior. At the same time, Heimat is a place of comfort and security, and it is a place which one understands and in which one is understood. The sense of Heimat gives one the feeling of safety and acceptance. As such, a positive understanding of Heimat is a prerequisite for stability, order, and orientation. The old High German word Heimute etymologically contains the Indo-Germanic root of K, meaning to be located. Therefore, Heimat is a place where one makes his home. The concept indicates tones of security and rest. Having a home makes it possible to enter into commitments and to stay by oneself, despite being constantly on the move. Heimat, however, is not a region one can pinpoint on a map, but rather our internally conceived relationship to the world. It must be actively acquired. It requires one to make oneself heimisch, to be at home. Heimat is something that comes to one. It forms unnoticed and is constituted by realities in which one finds oneself. Thus, one becomes aware of what Heimat is only when one experiences what it is not, and when one encounters the unfamiliar and the alien. Heimat is always Heimat for someone, like color is relative to each individual's color perception. In the notion of Heimat, interior and exterior reality, which can't be substantially solved, becomes entangled. Heimat is not only a construction, a result of subjective construction, but the geographic and situational positioning of personal events and autobiographical processes. Similar to an actual occasion, Heimat does not move nor develop. It is what it is and where it is. One difficulty in the scientific acquisition of Heimat is that the objectification sciences aim to gain knowledge those subjects are no longer daseinsrelativ. It means relative to being. This is the concept of Scheler. Also no longer daseinsrelativ in life and are no comparative to its possible values. The anthropological investigation of Heimat, by contrast, focuses on the innermost core of individuals and at the same time inquires about its relevance for the development of collective identity. The exploration of Heimat from ethnological and anthropological standpoints by no means not only looks at individuals, but also precisely at their societies of which the individual is a part. These standpoints are interested in focusing on individuals not only because social constructions are invisible through them, but also because, as a rule, they contain focuses on their connection to others as well. In other words, those social bonds which out of individuals make a community or society. Social relationships, however, always exist in space and time. In this way, the preoccupation with Heimat shifts our attention to concrete places in which individuals feel at home, and thereby to the relation of place and localization. In this sense, Heimat proves to be an organic totality from predetermined nature and, subsequently, from constructed human order, meaning from each specific culture which has been created, shaped, and maintained by people. Such a socially constructed process of Heimat begins on the basis of inaccessible material and biological conditions, operates with knowledge-based basis, and is characterized by the order of existing social, juridical, and political structures, but can transgress and change these structures. This is why visions and potentialities here and now can also already be components in the creation of Heimat. As a subjective aim, they are important for the formation of the actual occasion Heimat and flow directly into the concrescence process. A positive connection Heimat is a valuable, perhaps even indispensable requirement for the stability and order of a community and for orientation, experience, and action. It's interesting that if you look at psychological studies, the Heimat concept has always a positive connotation. There's no negative Heimats for the people. You can say Heimat is the sum of the positive prehension of individual localizations. Certainly, Heimat has always to be overcome, as you have always go to new layers of Heimat, and new knowledge will be integrated in Heimat. Subsequently, Heimat has always to be affirmed. You can say, if you look back in retrospect, Heimat then is a transmission process of individual concrescence processes of Beheimatung. So Heimat is socially a nexus of Beheimatung. In general, Heimat denotes the social cultural foundation of individual conduct. Nevertheless, in this role, Heimat is not static, but rather a social process of concrescence in which future conditions and conditions beyond the Heimat are adopted. Due to such interaction time structures, Heimat is thereby consistently overcome or adopted. Therefore, what the overall individual Beheimatung amount to consists of the social efforts of various layers of time. These are also often accompanied by a boundary crossing of meaningful layers, whereby the respective higher level of each lower level is temporally and factually subordinate. Well, the first layer in which a person feels at home is nothing more than his own body. The body is that eigenspace in which all of its moods, feelings, and abilities, from the most elementary to the high specialized, are inhabited. The next layer is probably the apartment, the house. The home as the center of human living. For Heidegger, the home plays a major role. And after the home, after comes the street, surrounded by the village or city, and then comes the region, surrounded by the state and overarching nation. A person experiences his Umwelt layer for layer, from smaller to larger increments. This, of course, has also its temporal dimension. In this layering sequence, a person transcends through the baby and toddler years into the kindergarten and school ages, then into puberty and the university years. Each section of time and each related place are, in all regards, the basis of the distinct layer of Heimat. If one wants to overstep a relevant layer of Heimat, mutual confidence is needed. Should such trust ever be broken, however, whatever kind of Beheimatung, where will also crumble. This is made clear by the extreme example of Auschwitz survivor Jean Amery. By being utterly reduced to the body, the tortured person loses all feelings of Heimat, because, quotation of Amery, one who succumbs to torture can no longer feel at home in the world. The humiliation of annihilation cannot be eliminated, already with the first hit in its entirety, but ultimately through torture, the collapsed confidence in the world will not be restored. A horror remains inside the tortured person after experiencing a fellow human being as a foe. What is more is that the person can no longer look beyond to a world in which the principle of hope prevails. End of quotation. From a lifestyle resource, Heimat becomes a problem when it is taken from a person through either torture, expulsion, or escape. Essentially, it's first through an experience of loss that a person becomes aware of how much he needs the feeling of Heimat. While in exile, Amery responded to the question of how much Heimat a person needs by explaining that the more one needs, the less he can carry with him. In the layering process of Heimat, which is striving from context to context, the appropriating and compiling of new Heimat becomes inaccessible once the appropriation process is through. This developmental process of Heimat correlates to the development of Whitehead's actual occasion. First, the subsequent actual occasions bring the concrescence process of the merging actual occasion to its end. What becomes Heimat is established in hindsight. These motivations for action which lead to the overcoming of the old Heimat and the formation of the new heaven, have their origin in the fertile creativity of the individual, particularly in his curiosity, his openness toward others, his ability to integrate new things, and his need for exchange and contact. Because people are, so to speak, eccentrically positioned in nature, as Plessner said, meaning that many of their aspirations lie outside of themselves, Heimat is constantly transcended. A common and that which is then societally felt as the nexus of Heimat, is a consequently quite susceptible outcome of the synchronization and coordination of many individual Beheimatungen. Once it exists, a specific positive awareness of Heimat leads to the congenital, stable and related patterns of action, which become visible and active in organizations, institutions, and social as well as political frameworks. A common culture patterns then also possibly cultivate shared vision for the future, which form a new subjective aim. This could also be a starting point to build up a new Heimat. If the positively felt Heimat is functionally narrowed, be it by the legal concepts of the era or by territorially, racial and utopian concepts of the ideologies like national socialism and communism of the 20th century, its intention is not the conquest of borders, but their creation. In this case, Heimat does not enable freedom, but limits it. By this means, both dictatorships in Germany, each with their particular understanding of Heimat, leads to the robbing of and extraction of Heimat. In one case, first the German Jews, then they displaced. In the other case, first the marginalized class enemy, and then the refugees of the Republic. If synchronization and coordination between the inner Beheimatung and the external Heimat are disturbed, then a time contingent loss of intimacy shift occurs, which leads to a rather abstract and comprehensive understanding of Heimat, as well as a return to regional roots and a learned socio-cultural identity. Hermann Lübbe says two things belong to the experience of Heimat. On the one hand side, the disappointment to the experience of advancement. On the one hand side, disappointment about its slowness and also the concern for its transformative power. Therefore, even essential systematic change should not proceed either too quickly nor too slowly, if stability is expected in the end. Societal advancement is namely positively experienced and supported so long as the individual space is secure. Should it become fragile, then one becomes skeptical of societal processes of change and begins to try to block those changes. And you can always kind of the skeptical and the block of changes observe in the changing of Eastern Germany. If I can send you an article after our lectures, and if you read the part about the Pegida stuff, this is kind of fraction of this development after unification. I guess I have to a little bit hurry up and would make a jump and want to say something about Heimat and its edges, because this is more the phenomenological part. So my goal is not to speak too long, but we can discuss the concept. Customarily, in the present discourse, Heimat is frequently reduced to place, something like the place of origin, birth, or where one lives, and thusly to a position in space, which also corresponds to the usage of the place name in New High German. In Old High German, on the other hand, place corresponds with Schneide, which means edge, Spitze, peak, and Ecke, corner. This name went beyond a starting or end point in terms of place or time and into a closer meaning of the whole space, the front and back ends, the borders, the edges, and the sides. Then the term in Middle High German denoted only a position, a place, a spot, or a site. Heimat as place should, however, be better understood as the Old High German definition, which covers the connection of events linked to spatio-temporal dimensions and reflects its boundaries. From the internal perspective, meaning from experience, Heimat is open and immeasurable. Someone who possesses Heimat doesn't tend to reflect how the term sheds its meaning. The so-called Schweizer Krankheit, the Swiss ailment, meaning Heimweh, homesickness, that affected the Swiss guards during their service in Rome occurred because of Heimatverlust, of the loss of Heimat. It's first from the external perspective that the edges of Heimat become clear. When one journeys outside of its Heimat, he will eventually find himself in the Fremde, the strange place. The Fremde, the other, restricts Heimat, and as a consequence becomes essential, meaning that Heimat has open boundaries where it can come to contentions with the others. From an internal view, Heimat is formed through a multitude of edges that connect it with the environment. Edward Casey, a phenomenologist here from the US, writes in his book, The Philosophy of Place, every edge of a place is interactive rather than intrinsic. There is no edge of any place that does not emerge from the way that places ingress into its own larger environs. The edges of a place interact with the environing world in a manifold and subtle ways. In contrast to sites, places possess multifaceted edges, where it's negotiated what should become place and how it should be conducted. In contrast to borders, which are impermeable, edges are permeable and surmountable. While borders are culturally and socio-politically set, such as country borders, religious delineations, or legal taboos, edges are principially open, allowing for new levels of transcendence from each given Beheimatung. Since indeed transcendence also pertains to Heimat. Its boundaries are then, so to speak, only hurdles which are meant to be overcome. And essentially, all places are merely layered Beheimatungen of past and present generations. A good example of this layering of Beheimatung are cities. These are always melting pots of modernization processes. Interesting is that as early as the tales of Greek mythology, place and movement have gone together. Jean-Pierre Vernant wondered why Hestia and Hermes were depicted on the huge statue of Zeus at Olympia, although they didn't belong there as a pair, since they were neither related by blood nor in marriage. He concluded that side by side they have an effect on the same place and display complementary functions. Hestia, Greek Estia, later Plato uses for Osea, represents the circular hearth in the middle of the house. This enclosed space symbolizing the connection to oneself. On the other side, Hermes, the god of the threshold and the door, but also of the crossroads and the city gates, who signifies the movement and relations to the others. So one cannot avoid motion in his life. And therefore, the search for Einhausung, for Heimat, is all the more important. Even Wohnen, the habitation, appears then as a relational process which has its roots and goals in discovery, appropriations, bonds, and identifications. And precisely from the experience of an active life, an adult is often fondly reminded of the happy spaces of his childhood, of the smells and the atmosphere in the rooms, on the street, in the forests. He searches for traces of contentment. According to Christoph Türke, the mother's womb is the first Heimat that a person must leave. It is, however, an actual non-space. Such a Heimat exists after the fact, after it's gone, and the return to it, its birth. In the same sense, we can no longer return to our childhoods, the next space of an original Beheimatung. And Ernst Bloch also does not see the evidence of a successful mediation of subjectivity and world in the longing for childhood, but in the activities of a person who actively reconstructs a piece of the world into Heimat and thereby a place like his childhood. Now comes the famous quotation, or the most famous quotation of Heimat from Ernst Bloch, and I will present it to you too. The real genesis is not at the beginning, but at the end. And it begins when society and existence becomes radical, meaning to put down roots. The roots of history, thought, is man working, creating, overhauling, and reshaping circumstances. If he comprehends this and establishes existence without externalization and alienation in actual democracy, when in the world something will occur that solely appears in childhood, where no one was. Heimat. Thus appears the principle of Heimat as an epitome of the principle of hope, as Ernst Bloch expressed. In this way, Heimat denotes the appropriation process of making one constantly at home. The need to live and the search for Heimat are closely related to the needs for recognition and participation. This, however, paints Heimatsuche, the search for Heimat, as a deeply political attitude. In the process, how do creativity and stability, transcendence and common sense interact? On one side, the practiced common sense already shapes the place, it establishes the place, collects new things. But on the other hand side, still transcendence and common sense also work against each other. Common sense limits the collective significance of those who share a place as Heimat, and it sets limitations, which at most can be transcended at the price of Entheimatung. In this way, the common sense channels the transcendence process and leads to its completion. So what I want to say, only to make it a little bit shorter on this place, common sense and transcendence are principles who work against each other or still work together. The common sense is a kind of a positive selection of what belongs to Heimat and what doesn't belong to Heimat. You can say it's a kind of positive prehension. And it gives in the analysis of Heimat 3 different forms of transcendence in the process. The first is that Heimat is inaccessible from the beginning on. You are always thrown into Heimat. You can't not choose it. It's the first point. You are born into Heimat. The second one, Heimat is made inaccessible layer for layer. So you transcendent. Heimat is self-transcendence itself from time to time. So you always acquire new Beheimatung. You start in your childhood, then you come in your elder time, your adulthood, and so on. So you have kind of layering of these Beheimatungen. And the third point, the second point is that Heimat itself is the overstep. Heidegger would say being itself is the overstep. And the third point of Heimat, or which concerns to Heimat, is the others, the Fremde. The Fremde is a special thing. The Fremde breaks into the Heimat. Heimat without Fremde, with the other, is inconceivable. The other is something that it's quotation of Bernhard Waldenfels, that admits all of the facultations, be it of a personal, dispositional, historical, cultural, or even a transcendental kind, proves to be impossible, a shock or challenge to existing possibilities. The Fremde breaks into Heimat, and it's changed everything. Bernhard Waldenfels named this Fremde later pathos. He says, pathos is meaning that we are struck by something, namely such that we struck by something, namely such that this from what is based neither in a previous what nor suspended in a subsequently achieved what for. So the pathos is not integratable in the Heimat. And the ambivalence of Heimat you always can see in the Greek word xenos. It means both guest and stranger. The stranger is associated with obligations. In this regard, Heimat is not exclusive during the encounter with the Fremden, but inclusive. It's a task to integrate. So the concrescence process of Beheimatung also forces one to choose between positive and negative prehensions. This can be seen in terms of the integration processes of immigrants and homecomers. They are constitutive of a community. since fundamental questions of self-interpretation in the cultural or political systems are dealt with because of their existence and because these wanderers are between the worlds. In the literature you can find this discussion of the Fremde because of these borderline crossers from the people who explored the world, like Magellan or other who went away and came back with information and changed the understanding of the world. So they had been, in a good way, they had been integrated. In a wrong way or a bad way, they are not integrated in the community. The prototype of Heimat, or of losing Heimat and coming back, is Odysseus. Odysseus left Ithaca, he crossed the border, and after a long absence, he returned to Ithaca and realizes that his Heimat is no longer how it was when he left it. The mythical homecomer, however, was not just exposed to the transition of the Fremde in the Heimat, but he could restore the order. In general, the homecomer can't do this. He must find his way in the new circumstances. If they are suitable for the expectations of the social environment, then their reintegration is successful. Otherwise, permanent conflicts or exclusion occurs. Homecomers are also, in this way, on the cusp of the present and the past, of reality and imagination. The Fremde is first created as a stereotypical projection surface. The experiences of the homecomer become memory and narration with the homecoming, which through selection and interpretation mold the Fremde into an independent entity. Narratives are not about the detailed replication of historical processes, but about the meaning and assessment of the experienced events from the perspective of the teller. Such a sense is attested, essentially created through authentic narrative. In other words, through his story, the narrator therefore opens up an insight into the manner in which he interprets his life and with which guiding ideas he has overcome it. Conversely, the disappearance of experience-based knowledge, which lies in tradition, means a disappearance of the narrative world, and with it, the large context, including that which can make Heimat reflexive and construct a non-naive manner from it. And one effect of the postmodern is that the large meta-narratives are lost. And this has also happened after the German unification for Eastern Germany, with the collapse of the political situation in 1989. A chance for the non-geographic gaining of Beheimatung is lost because the utopia of an egalitarian society disappeared. So only what remains is the construction mechanism of non-geographic Beheimatung. This is that the religion or the religious pictures play a major role in understanding Heimat. Let's see. I would like to come to an end. The last idea is to tell you a little bit about the history of Heimat. In the 19th century, in the 2020s, Heimat was very strong coupled with community and became a counter term against the modern bourgeois order. It was a reason why it was taken both by the National Socialist and the Communist, because they used this utopia of Heimat to tighten together the Gemeinschaft. And Theodor Adorno then tried to establish a new Heimat concept, which is not in accordance with the old Heimat understanding. He established a concept which is to be understood as a transcendental horizon of intersubject narratives in the context of the historical civilization process. And this is appropriate for an understanding of an open society. If the society is a community of narrators and listeners, then modern Heimat is a social space filled with communication and information. In this sense, Beheimatung means finding a common subjective aim in the concrescence process. For Adorno, is when the community of tellers and the community of the people who listen, this is the Heimat, the social room of telling and listening. Let's come to the summary. Heimat and Beheimatung signify the relation of place and localization. They build units out of existing nature in the order which are produced through the action of people. The concrescence process of Heimat begins with the existing absolute facts of the inaccessible world, which are modified in the process of Beheimatung, and their future integration processes are made available. The layering process of Heimat leads from the data of the potential existing events through the dealing activity to the potentiality of delivered events. At the time, the manifestation of these processes happen in concrete places and in certain cultural contexts. We have always been beheimated. Thus, Heimat denotes the starting point and the foundation of individual activity. However, Heimat is not a static term. It's a teleological one. As an organicistically structured term, it holds a forming power which anticipates future conditions and conditions outside of Heimat. In this way, Heimat is continually overcome and must be newly appropriated. That which constitutes individual Beheimatung as a whole consists of stroboscopic Heimaten, of varying time layers. And every layer of Heimat is characterized by three aspects, which are interlaced with each other. This is the spatial aspect, the temporal aspect, and the social aspect. You can say Heimat is an example of an actual occasion, though its physical pole is characterized by the sensory perceptions of the formative environment, that is, the developed structures, the houses, the streets, the landscape, and the cultural objects, but also smells and tastes and sound and so on. The viewing habits of our molded virtual world also belong on the list, like the designed user interfaces of computer programs and so on. The mental pole, on the other hand, presents the narrated everyday reality, the meaningful pictures and terms which are expressed in the narratives of a person or society. It contains dimensions of lived culture and practiced religion. And physical and mental pole are related to each other through the societal bond of the community, meaning the aspects of life. This is the third dimension of Heimat, the aspects of life. And Edward Casey, the phenomenologist whom I mentioned just before, for them, his Heimat places are shaped by culture, life, and gathering. The collected artifacts mark the physical pole. They determine the places, even when they are no longer places of Beheimatung. And culture, on the other hand, denotes a lived culture, the cult, which is expressed in rites and meaningful actions and influences by narratives, which enable the Beheimatung. Finally, the physical environment and the lived culture is connected to each other through life. You can say Heimat is a prerequisite for building up a society. If you have a positive relation to your Heimat or a positive Heimat concept, then you can build up a human society. And so you feel you have to have a positive Heimat relationship. And the second part of this lecture would be another lecture, to speak about these East German stress situations which came up in the last demonstrations, which I sent to you, and you can read it later on. Thank you very much.